بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمت إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما تعلمنا وزدنا من فضلك علما وتعليما إنك على كل شيء قدير. Alhamdulillah wa shukru lillah. Welcome everybody to this presentation. We're going to be talking about today the Hayat Tayyiba's cure chronic conditions, begin to lose weight, reverse diabetes, and cure high blood pressure in 6 weeks. We're going to take a look at exactly what the program is about. But before we begin, I'd like you to take a mental quiz. 10 questions here. We're going to go through them real quickly. You answer yes or no in your mind. Even if you answer yes to one of these questions, there could be something wrong. First question is, do you have a family history of diabetes, heart disease, obesity? Are you overweight? Do you have extra belly fat? Extra belly fat means the following waist sizes. Do you have sugar cravings? Or have you been diagnosed with insulin resistance, diabetes, or prediabetes? Do you have high triglycerides or low HDLs? Do you have high blood pressure? Do you get less than 30 minutes of exercise 4 times a week? Have you ever had gestational diabetes or PCOS? Do you suffer from infertility, low sex drive, or sexual dysfunction? If you answered yes to at least one of these questions, you could be having some level of insulin resistance, which is a chronic condition. So let's talk a little bit about chronic conditions. Standard medical practice is excellent for acute and emergent conditions. Think about lacerations or broken bones or cardiac arrest. But you don't have time to take some herbal medication for 3 months. You need life-saving interventions now. However, modern and standard medical practice is horrible and sometimes even worse for many chronic conditions. And why is that the case? There's several reasons. Studies show it takes about 14 to 18 years for research to actually catch up to actual practice. Another significant reason is that research, data, and practice is actually heavily influenced by corporations. And just the entire paradigm of the current medical model is that it treats disease. It doesn't create or promote health. We have a chronic condition pandemic. 6 in 10 Americans have chronic conditions. 4 in 10 have multiple chronic conditions. Chronic disease are a cause of 7 out of 10 deaths per year. It's even affecting kids. So between 1994 and 2006, there has been a double of chronic disease in children. And that's 20 years ago almost. So think about what it is now. These are numbers from America, but it's a global problem because 1 in 3 people in the world suffers from multiple chronic conditions. And what are the top 3 chronic conditions? High blood pressure, diabetes, and obesity. Now, there's a significant monetary cost to these 3 diseases. High blood pressure can cost a person about $2,500 per year, while obesity or excess weight can cost about $2,700 a year, whereas diabetes, which is way more significant of a costly burden, can cost $12,000 per year. And this is for the patient. Now, that's just monetary. However, the quality of life suffers as well. So you have things like headache and fatigue with blood pressure. With diabetes, you have obviously fatigue, but it's a very slow process where you start losing a lot of faculties of your body. Blurred vision, slow healing, problems in hands and feet, numbness and tingling. And obesity and excess weight, you'll have low self-esteem, even depression, difficulty breathing, joint pain, and so on and so forth. Quality of life is significantly affected. So what we're going to be talking about is diabetes, which is a spectrum of syndrome ranging from just a little bit of excess weight to obesity to insulin resistance to prediabetes to diabetes. And as we'll see just shortly, that it's all the same process. So it's a term called diabetes. If you take a look at insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome or obesity, prediabetes, and diabetes 2, it's literally all one problem. And the problem is an imbalance of glucose and insulin as a response to certain foods. That leads to excess glucose and excess insulin in the body, which leads to insulin resistance. We'll get to the physiology of that in just a minute. All of this, interestingly, can happen 10 years before even being diagnosed with diabetes. The standard of care right now in the standard medical practice is to check or screen patients with hemoglobin A1C and check their blood glucose level. If it's normal, patient's told, you're fine, you don't have diabetes, you don't even have pre-diabetes. However, what they don't check and what they should check is the insulin fasting levels, 1 hour and 2 hour level post 75 milligrams of a glucose tolerance test, because this actually can show the level of insulin resistance about 10 years before it shows up as a diabetic problem. When you have insulin resistance and you have excess insulin, this can lead to several other things like actual diabetes or obesity or excess weight, fatty liver disease, PCOS, erectile dysfunction, certain cancers and heart disease, and even infertility and much more. So this is the essence of the problem, which is a spectrum. Now, I want to discuss the hormone insulin and take a deeper dive on what is it and what does it do. If you understand the next two slides, then you will understand the entire program and why we're doing what we're doing. Insulin is a hormone, and what is its main job? Its main job is that it is a key, like a key that opens up a door. If you take a look at the image on the left side, you see insulin as this yellow key that it's going to bind to the insulin receptor on the cell. As it binds to it, as you see on the right picture, it unlocks the glucose channel, the glucose door, and then glucose is able to enter the cell. Now, firstly, why is glucose trying to go into the cell? Is because glucose is what our body uses for energy. We can break glucose down, get energy for our individual cell, and when you put it together, our entire body. And that's the normal physiology of what happens. There's 2 points that you need to remember about insulin. The higher the blood sugar rises after a meal, the more insulin is released. The higher the blood sugar rises after a meal, the more insulin is released. If you eat something that is not too much sugar in it, but has a little bit of carbohydrates or a little bit of glucose in it, then your body's not going to need that much insulin to release it in order to get it into the cells so that it can use it. But if you eat something that significantly increases the blood sugar, especially if it's really refined, you get a surge of blood sugar in the blood. Now, as this surge happens, and these surges are called sugar spike or glucose spike, then your body's going to pump a significant more insulin into the body. Keep that in mind, and that'll come on the next slide. The second thing is that inflammation contributes to insulin resistance. So if you're eating things that are very pro-inflammatory, it's going to contribute to your insulin resistance. With that in mind, let's take a look at some pathophysiology. When you eat some food, any food, it goes through your digestive system into your small intestines. There, the food is broken down and then absorbed in your bloodstream. As you see the picture, which is there's a blood vessel with those white little dots there. Those white dots are glucose. So there's a lot of glucose in the blood. So that's a good thing. That's how we get energy. As there's a whole bunch of glucose in the bloodstream, this signals to the brain, hey, we have a lot of glucose in the blood. Let's activate the pancreas, which is the yellow pancreas in this picture. So the pancreas secretes insulin as the blood sugar increases in the bloodstream. And why does it secrete insulin? In order to get the glucose from the blood into the individual cells, because our body wants to utilize it. So that's what it's trying to do. And our body doesn't like that our blood vessels have a lot of glucose in it. So it's going to want to regulate it. So for example, if your fasting glucose is 80 and now you eat a meal and all of a sudden it goes up to 110, your pancreas is going to secrete insulin enough so that the glucose can go inside the cell, and then the glucose from the blood vessels will drop down to 80 again. So it's going to want to maintain that. So that's the normal process. But now what happens if you're constantly eating two types of food? Foods that increase your blood sugar level significantly and all of a sudden in surges. You're eating that, let's say 3 times a day. You're eating foods that increase or that give you that blood sugar surge or spikes. And secondly, you're eating a lot of pro-inflammatory foods. What's going to happen, first of all, is that you're going to have a significant amount of blood glucose going directly into the bloodstream quickly. And so you're going to have a lot of hyperglycemia or a lot of blood sugar in the vessels. Your pancreas is going to be working overtime and pumping out a lot of insulin to try to get the blood sugar levels down. And that's going to continue and continue. But after a while, it's difficult to keep up because let's say you're constantly eating things that have a high glycemic index, or what that means is a high spikes or high surges, or you're eating a lot of pro-inflammatory foods. So what happens is the body is going to start to find solutions to try to get the blood sugar in the vessels, in the blood vessels down. So what happens is it starts storing glucose in the liver, in the muscles, and specifically in around the abdomen. It goes to the liver and it'll store it in something called glycogen storage. So that's just a storage form of glucose. We'll store it here, we'll store it here so that maybe sometime in the future we can utilize it more. But the priority is to get the blood sugar levels down because that could be very dangerous. Why is that dangerous? Think about it. If there's a lot of sugar in your blood, think about normal water and then think about the viscosity of like syrup. It's very thick. So you'll have relatively thicker blood, and thicker blood, number one, you won't get as much as flow and you won't get therefore oxygen and nutrients where it needs to go because there's not much flow. And then there's more of a propensity and likelihood of clots happening. Clots perhaps in the heart, which is a heart attack, clots in the brain, which is a stroke, clots in other places in the body. Okay, so it really causes a lot of trouble. So the body really is a priority to get the blood sugar levels down by storing it anywhere it can. So it stores it in the liver, it stores it in the muscles, and it stores it in the abdomen, specifically as fats. Now, if you note, every single area in the body basically is pretty tight and compressed and compact. So you don't have much space to work with, except for the abdomen. In the abdomen, you have actually a lot of space, and moreover, you can get more space by expanding it. So what will happen is that the insulin will eventually convert the glucose to visceral fat, or fat that's specifically in the visceral area, the abdominal area. And again, the goal is one thing. The goal is to get the blood sugar levels down. Now, what happens after a while is that the insulin receptor, if there's all this insulin happening, there's all this insulin everywhere because the body's just working overtime pumping insulin. And so the insulin receptor, it starts becoming a little bit less sensitive to insulin because there's insulin everywhere. It's getting tired. And so now another problem is not only that there's a lot of glucose here, and now there's a lot of insulin trying to get the glucose in the cell. Now the insulin receptor, like the keyhole, is getting a little bit rusty, or it's getting worn out by being overworked. So then insulin resistance starts to occur, meaning that the body itself no longer is responding in the same manner to insulin that it would before. So insulin is being pumped out and now the cells aren't listening. They're not opening the door to glucose to come in. So what happens? Glucose just stays outside in the blood vessels, which is number one, very dangerous. And then there's all this extra insulin all over the body now, unable to do its job, just floating around, and it'll go around and cause a lot of other issues. And this is where insulin resistance begins. The inside of the cell is no longer accepting glucose because the insulin receptor is just done and fatigued and tired. And so inside the cell, they're glucose starved. Remember, we need some glucose for energy. So inside the cell, it's starved, but extracellularly, meaning outside the cell, there's a whole bunch of glucose. It just can't come in because the insulin receptor is now worn out. So your body detects that inside the cells, there's not much glucose. So what does your brain tell yourself? It tells you to eat more carbs, eat more sugars, because I know there's glucose in there. Because the brain thinks it's starving from glucose, but it's not. That's not the problem. The problem is there's insulin resistance developing. Now, this continues and the pancreas is working overtime until it just can't take it anymore. And now the beta cells are a specific area of cells in the pancreas that actually secrete the insulin hormone. The beta cells start also getting fatigued and they start burning out. This is a big problem because this is when pre-diabetes and diabetes develops. And then from here is just the spectrum of how damaged the pancreas is, how damaged the beta cells are, and how insulin resistant are you, and how much insulin can you produce. So a very advanced diabetes, there's insulin insufficiency where the pancreas can no longer make insulin by itself. It's just the beta cells are completely destroyed. So that's one extreme. The opposite extreme is there is a person that they're healthy, they don't have diabetes, they don't have pre-diabetes. They may even be somewhat skinny, but have a little bit of fat, specifically in the abdominal area, and they may get cravings for sugar and carbs. So this person, although they're on the spectrum of having insulin resistance, our current medical model would not tell this person anything because they're not sick yet. Make sense? There's a couple of images here with diabetes. In this process, the body deposits a lot of fat in the visceral area, and you get an apple shape where majority of the fat is around the visceral area, right? Versus a pear shaped is it goes around the thighs and buttocks more. If you have an apple shaped abdomen, or what that means is if you have an apple distribution of fat, you're 4 times more likely to develop a lot of the associated diseases with diabetes. And you can see on the right side, we have visceral fat slowly increasing in this example. What is the source of the problem? The source of the problem is high glycemic foods, which are refined carbs and sugars that give you that surge and spike, and inflammatory foods like bad vegetable oils, processed foods, and GMOs, and so on and so forth. This is the main source of the problem. What's the result? The result is insulin resistance, which leads to diabetes, which leads to problems and more problems. And so solution is resetting the entire system. Welcome to Hayat Tayyiba's Cure Chronic Condition 6-week program. But first, I want to introduce you all to someone. Meet Sister Farhana. Sister Farhana came to us when she was 49 years old. She's married. She was overweight. She had really high blood pressure. Sometimes it would go up to 170 over 120. She had prediabetes and she had insulin resistance. She could barely walk for 10 minutes without getting exhausted. And she mentioned that her duties as a wife and a mother of 4 were a struggle. Her poor health was affecting her ability to work. She was a teacher and she was stressed. She was on the edge and everything just seemed to just get her angry and she just couldn't take it anymore. And so she reached out to us and we worked with her. And what happened was, well, let me just have her tell you the story. She says, quote, I was 49 years old when I was diagnosed with severe hypertension, prediabetes, and insulin resistance during a medical checkup in January 2022. I had to take hypertension medication because my situation was critical, but I was determined not to be on it for the rest of my life. I was trying all health tips I came across, and at the same time, I wanted to find a medical professional that I could trust. I believe there is healing for any metabolic syndrome. I started the Hayat Tayyiba consultation in mid-September 2023. At that time, my blood pressure was usually 140 over 100 and could go up to 170 over 120. Alhamdulillah, after 4 months of gradual implementation of the Hayat Tayyiba's wellness plan and the herbal medicine recommended, my blood pressure improved to 114 over 81. My sleep quality improved tremendously. I can take much longer walks, 2 hours compared to 10 minutes. My fasting blood glucose level is in the safe range and I'm not pre-diabetic anymore. Last but not least, my weight loss became a reality and it's a few kilograms from my target. So Sister Farhana's struggle with those medical conditions is actually very common. But like Sister Farhana, you can do something about it. So let's talk a little bit about Hayat Tayyiba's Cure Chronic Condition 6-week program. One of the distinguishing features about this program is that we have a community, meaning you'll be doing this in a group. We have a weekly online group meeting, which I'll be present at. We have a specific Telegram group that we make where you can talk about your experiences, your struggles. You can vent there. You can post pictures of foods that you made. And you'll make weekly calls to your progress partner to check up on them, to see how they're doing. And vice versa. People will call you to see how you're doing. So you're not going to do it alone. The Prophet ﷺ said, Yadullahi ala al-jama'ah. The hand of Allah is upon the group. But there's also accountability. Accountability equals success. There'll be a public and shared progress tracker that you'll update every single day of your tasks. And everybody will be able to see everybody else's score to see how they're doing and how they compare to others. We found this very effective as it creates a culture of wanting to update the progress tracker and wanting to get your things done. So there's a level of accountability there. In addition to the progress tracker, there is an area of weight tracker. Now, I know people are very sensitive about discussing their weight, which is fine. We want to respect everybody's privacy. However, every single week, you will update the weight change that you've measured for that particular week. So although we don't know exactly how much you weigh, you will update how much weight you lost at the beginning of every week. We'll also be using a coaching software through which I'll be tracking your progress, sending you regular messages, and adjusting things based on your specific scenarios. Yet another distinguishing feature of this program is journaling. Yahya ibn Mu'adh al-Razi, one of the awliya, one of the spiritual saints of the past, said, Man arafa nafsahu arafa rabbahu. Whoever knows himself knows their Lord. And it's a part of our spiritual journey to increase in our self-awareness and introspection. And many of the the past and present spiritual saints have recommended and have reached this by journaling or writing things down. When you write things down, it becomes objective data that you can track. So you're not going to keep it all in your mind just like the other million things, but you're going to actually utilize this 6-week program as an opportunity to tap into your thoughts, your feelings, emotions, and your journey. You'll jot down your motivations, your obstacles, goals, how this or that food makes you feel. You'll even journal if the craving that you have is an actual hunger or is it an emotional hunger. You'll be journaling throughout the entire process. Let's discuss the program week by week. Week 1, you'll be taking your body measurements, you'll be taking self-assessment quizzes, and diagnostic tests that we recommend. Week 1 is mostly about preparation. You'll be having a one-on-one assessment with myself or one of the other medical providers. You'll prepare your mind by tapping into your motivation, your obstacles, and your goals. You'll prepare yourself. You'll prepare your healthy kitchen. You'll prepare your inner shopper and your inner chef. You'll prepare the body by removing some specific stimulants, namely caffeine and sugars. Week 2, we're going to start introducing eating healthy foods. So there'll be a list of green foods, yellow foods, and red foods. Green foods, you can have unlimited supply. Yellow foods, you eat in moderation. And red foods, you're going to completely avoid. These are things like grains, sugars, flour product, gluten, dairy, fruit, starchy vegetables, and all caffeinated beverages. Now, we'll discuss how to do these specifically so that you don't get many of the withdrawal symptoms people get. Week 3, we focus on exercise and starting our nutritional supplements. Week 4, we'll hone in on sleep to increase the quality and the quantity of your sleep based on your specific scenario. Week 5, we'll focus on social media and being on devices. Through monitoring, we'll see how social media increases our stress hormone, which affects our insulin levels, and will help each other limit our exposure to these stressors. We may even take a social media fast. And the last week, we'll focus on stress, mental stress, how to identify negative thought behaviors and how to overcome them through knowledge and through religion. So each week we will add another aspect and focus on it. So what are you going to get? The quality of your life. No more fatigue, sustained energy. You're going to have revitalized sleep, increased productivity, improved physical intimacy, confidence, and spiritual fulfillment, inshallah ta'ala. And so what is required from you specifically? The thing is, when you change a habit, it requires 3 things: knowledge, skill, and desire. We're going to help you with the knowledge and the skill, which is the practice. But what's required from you is a burning desire that during this 6 weeks, this is the single most important thing that you'll be doing throughout this time period. The spiritual saints say spirituality is ilm wal amal wal hal, knowledge, practice, which gives you a resultant spiritual state. And similarly here, we're going to need knowledge, we're going to need practice, and it's going to give us results, inshallah ta'ala. But what we need is a strong desire. So see the product page to see when the next cohort starts and sign up right now. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'll see you there. Wassalam.